I'm so glad you came, Ethan. So since we got a few folks in the room, welcome to a guided meditation live stream. Uh, I am one of the facilitators for the Awakening Heart community of mindful living in Dallas. And because I travel so much, I wanted to make sure that I stayed plugged into the community, and I thought about how other people could connect with a community even if they're not physically located in Dallas, where the Dallas Meditation Center happens to be. And with online guided meditation, right? Unless you get a computer virus. This is going to stay pretty succinct, but we're going to practice a short mindfulness meditation together. There's really not too much that you can do wrong. Um, all I'll invite y'all to do is listen along to the sound of my voice and see if you can do the best that you can um, to focus on the invitations that I'm making for y'all. To give a little bit of context, all mindfulness is on something in our present moment environment, but it also might be focused on something in the past or something in the future. And that's not always a bad thing. But if we get stuck, if we get our attention stuck in the past or the future, there can be anxiety or guilt, regret, shame that comes with that. So, all that we're doing for the next 10, 15 minutes is practicing bringing our attention back to the present moment. And the easiest way to do that is by focusing our attention on the breath, right? Because you don't need any special equipment, you don't need anything with you. You can always focus your attention back on the breath to get yourself out of your head, get yourself out of rumination, or beating up on yourself, or just not feeling particularly connected. All right. Yeah, making sure y'all got the link. But before we get started, I want to start with the opening affirmation for the Awakening Heart community of mindful living. And then I would be tickled if y'all, it's really accessible to anyone who wants to join. And I like to think that we get something out of practicing together. So if you know it, you are welcome to join in at home. Otherwise, you just get to listen as we set a positive intention for our meditation tonight. May we and all beings be safe and free from injury. May we and all beings transform our suffering. May we and all beings rejoice in all joys. May we and all beings be at peace. So, holding that intention in your mind's eye, go ahead and allow yourself to settle into a position of comfort for you. If you're feeling lethargic and hoping to energize yourself a little bit more, I invite you to stay sitting, either cross legged or with your feet flat on the floor. If you're feeling particularly tired or fatigued, I'd like to invite y'all to go ahead and lie down, spread out. There is some discipline in the practice, but it's really not a practice of self denial. For these next few minutes, we're making the environment as comfortable as we can so that we can practice with a minimal amount of distraction. Especially if you're in a busy environment, I'd invite you to close your eyes. But if that doesn't feel congenial or safe to you, go ahead and allow your gaze to rest somewhere in front of you without looking at anything in particular. And once we've found this posture that feels comfortable for us to stay in, here's where we coax our attention and get really curious about the sensation, the experience of breathing. And this is something that we do all the time, whether or not we're aware of it. And most of the time, we might not be aware of the natural rhythms and cycles of the breath. But here for these next few minutes, I want you to look with the eyes of wonder, this biological bellows mechanism is what keeps us alive. And see if you can notice the sensation of air entering and leaving the nostrils or the mouth. See if you can feel the throat. We're not doing anything to try to change the depth, the quality of our breathing. Just getting real curious. What is it like here? What is it like here? Go ahead and shift your attention downward until you're focusing on the natural expansion and contraction of the rib cage with each breath. Breathing in healing oxygen, and breathing out any tension you might find in the body. And seeing if you can notice the exact point at which an in breath turns around to become an out breath. And the ever so slight pause where the out breath turns around to become the next in breath. And at any point, if you find that your attention has wandered to an internal or external distraction, there's no need to judge that wandering. It's what the mind does. Its job is to pay attention to the internal and external environment, to alert you of any changes or new developments. But if you think of the mind a bit like an untrained dog or a small child who just hasn't had very much practice with this sort of training, you can very gently, very lovingly coax the attention back to the breath sensation. Might like to focus on the nostrils like a spotlight of attention if it's particularly warm where you are. And there's a cool breeze at the nostrils with each breath. You might focus on the dropping of the diaphragm, relaxation of the abdomen. If you're feeling uncentered and looking to ground yourself a little more. And so that's the heart of this ever so simple practice. The mind may wander to a sound that we hear, and we pull it back to the breath. The mind may wander to a thought that arises, whether it's a pleasant thought, a daydream, a worrying thought, or a judgment. We know that this is our time to practice refocusing the attention. So we just let it go. And when we learn how to do this, let it go and refocus on the physical breath sensation, we can learn that our anxious thoughts, our ruminations, they don't go anywhere if we don't feed them. As many times as it takes, we simply bring our attention back. And when we experience a few quiet moments when the mind has gotten tired of wandering and allows us to just sit, we can find that there is a certain amount of joy inherent to the practice of breathing. Breathing in healing oxygen, breathing out any tension. Breathing oxygen like a nice morning stretch for our lungs can feel so good if you let it. And then letting it out, letting out any tension along with it. I'm going to allow us to share a few moments of silence to practice this refocusing, practice the simple pleasure of breathing. Go ahead and allow yourselves to wiggle fingers and toes and reorient to the room around you, feeling refreshed and restored in your ability to stay grounded in the present moment. And knowing that we can present moment awareness with us throughout the rest of our day. I'd like to leave you with a short reading before we shift gears. It is from Thich Nhat Hanh's book called Anger. Let us use a house to represent our consciousness. We can identify two parts. The living room is our conscious mind, and the basement is a repository of latent or store consciousness. Internal formations like anger rest in the basement until you hear, see, read, or think of something that reminds you of your feeling of anger. We allow them to come up. We will be overwhelmed by suffering. But when we try to suppress them, we suffer ill effects, including mental illness. There's a certain amount of suffering that arises when you embark on the process of allowing these emotions to come up. But for this reason, our practice of mindfulness is so important. After being embraced by the energy of mindfulness, these negative internal formations lose their power and stop being so dangerous. So you give your anger, your despair, your fear a bath of mindfulness every day. If you know how to create the right container, it is very healing to invite these emotions up and allow them to circulate so that they can transform into something new. Thank you so much for joining me on this guided meditation. I want to remind y'all that the Dallas Meditation Center is entirely supported by donations from the community. So I'm going to post a link to the donation page in the chat box if you feel like this was of value to you. And please consider making a donation to help support the continued meeting. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this live stream up so that we can get started in the channel.